My name is Benton Stokes. I'm a former fundamentalist, post-evangelical worship leader, and songwriter. I enjoy Rye Manhattans, roller coasters, and road trips, just not all at the same time.
I'm Elane O'Rourke, and I'm a teacher, an author, and a spiritual coach. I was a philosophy professor and a liberal pastor in a couple of former lives, and these days I love aha moments and not-so-dry martinis.
We have conversations about life and God with a queer perspective, over cocktails, like you. This is Cocktail Theology. This drink is the bee's knees.
And I have a confession to make. Mm-hmm. I am a scoundrel and a cheat.
Are you now?
I am, because I have already tried it.
Have you?
I have.
Well,
it's really good.
Well, that's why I said it was the bee's knees.
I know.
Because it is really good. So the bee's knees is a Prohibition-era cocktail, and it does play on that phrase. It is a simple 3-ingredient cocktail. It's gin, it's lemon juice, and it's honey syrup. And honey syrup can be as simple as just diluting honey with hot water. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's pretty yummy.
It's very yummy.
And it's heavy on the gin, so whatever gin you use is going to dictate the flavor of the cocktail. So if you use like a London Dry, then it's going to be more juniper-y. Mm-hmm. If you use more of a local regional gin, like a California gin where we are, or if you choose a gin from a different region, it's going to reflect the botanicals that are there.
So Hendrick's, of course, makes a whole line of various kinds of gins.
Right.
Wouldn't it be fun to make a bee's knees with each of them and taste it and just see how different it is?
It would.
I love it. There's a plan.
It would, because the honey, of course, is going to play differently with each one.
That's right. And you could do different kinds of honey.
You could do different kinds of honey.
This could be like a whole pilgrimage lifestyle change for us. We're like every day we use a different kind of honey, make a different kind of syrup, and try it with 18 different gins.
Lots of bees' knees.
A lot of bees' knees. Bees' knees.
Bees' knees. And today we are posing the question, should Christians care about, read, study the Hebrew Scriptures? Why are the Hebrew Scriptures relevant? Are they? If they are, why? To modern Christians?
Here's why I think it's an important question. There is a tradition of saying that Christians, not Jesus followers, Christians are selected, chosen, different, special, that the New Testament is really all that matters, right? So there's this kind of tradition of this way of thinking. So, okay, well, let's go from there. So then, even if that's true, the question is, should we value the Hebrew Scriptures? And if so, why? When you were growing up, I know you did a lot of Bible-y stuff growing up. What was, like, how much Hebrew Scripture did you do versus Christian Scripture stuff?
In Sunday school, I learned all the stories. Noah, Jonah, Abraham, Adam and Eve. I learned all the stories. I don't remember our pastor preaching from the Old Testament very much. It's possible that he did, and I just don't recall. Right. I wasn't the most attentive in grown-up church. I know.
What?
I know.
Okay.
But I do think that, with fundamentalist churches that lean heavily on kind of do this, don't do this, scare you with the threat of hell if you do this and not that, or don't do that and do this, you know what I mean? One would think that is a very kind of Old Testament view of just how you live your life. Big, scary God. I'm not saying that Old Testament God is big and scary, but a lot of people consider God from the Old Testament to be bigger and scarier than the one that we study in the New Testament. For
sure. People talk like that all the time.
Yeah, but I don't remember there being a heavy emphasis on the Old Testament.
Okay.
I do remember there being a very big emphasis on the New Testament, particularly the Acts of the Apostles and the Gospels. Okay. I grew up studying the Bible and preparing for competitions where we had to answer multiple choice questions. And one year I won state because I learned all of the,
I can totally see that.
Yeah, I did that. I mean, it was a good exercise for me because I memorized so much Bible and I remember so much of that still today. So I'm grateful for that. But I don't remember there being a big emphasis on the Old Testament growing up, other than in Sunday school and the stories.
Okay. The stories, particularly in the myth part of the Hebrew Scriptures, that is everything before Abraham, they're stories that have such a fantastic, as in fantasy, feel to them, that they lend themselves to children's stories. Now, Noah's always a tricky one, I think, because, Noah, you've got all the animals, but then you have, the entire planet being wiped
death
out.
And destruction.
which in Sunday school, they sort of kind of, look at all the cute animals. Oh, and then they finally landed.
Right.
It's like Gilligan's Island, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like...
Well, and then there again is sort of that threatening God, because it's like God really liked Noah and his family, so they got to be on the boat with all the animals, right?
Right. Yeah, what I always find really striking about, and this doesn't actually address the question at all, but what I always find really striking about certain streams of fundamentalism, evangelicalism, that group, is that it seems like they take this very legalistic view of God and this very angry or vindictive or just in that really scary way, God, and tie it in with this weird reading of Revelation. It's like they take the two things and merge them together and say, this is what we believe. And it's like, wow, that's weird.
It's really weird and really dark.
Yeah, it's really dark. So growing up nominally Episcopal, and I say nominally because, I went to lots of people's churches, but the Episcopal Church is where kind of my foundation was as a kid. In the liturgical churches, particularly in the Episcopal Church, you read from the lectionary, and the lectionary is that 3-year cycle of readings that liturgical churches use. Anyway, the great part about that is every week you read something from the Hebrew Scriptures, you read a psalm, and then some combination of things from the Christian Scriptures.
Yeah.
Right? And so you get a sense that all of it matters.
Right.
You stand up for the gospel. That's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
But you get a sense that all of it matters, that there's a reason that these ancient words matter, even though Jesus. Right? And I think it's partly because they don't think that that Jesus sprung out of nowhere like Venus from the head of Zeus. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I realize I just mixed metaphors of the Venus and Zeus thing, but you understand the idea, right?
Yeah.
So there's always this sense when you're learning from the lectionary that there is a connection, that somehow these things are tied together, and that you can't really understand the Gospels without having some sense of what happened before.
Yeah.
That sense of continuity was really deeply impressed upon me.
Yeah.
I think.
I love the lectionary. And I like that.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But I think there are another couple of reasons that have nothing to do with that it's important for those of us who follow Jesus or call ourselves Christians or whatever, should really pay attention to the Hebrew Scriptures as an entity, not picking and choosing, but as an entity. And one of them is that, Jesus's Scriptures were those.
Yes.
And so to understand Jesus's position and where he's coming from, you really have to kind of have a sense of what his faith was and what it told him and how it informed his views.
Right.
Right. It's like I've heard some people say that, the great commandment, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, love your neighbor as yourself, is like this wild new thing. It's like, well, actually, no. That's the way, that's the structure of the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a consistent theme through the Hebrew Scriptures.
Right.
And if you don't know that, then it's like Jesus is like Buddha, right? Like, ooh. Yeah. No.
Like he's just talking in Proverbs.
If a leaf falls in the forest. Yeah, exactly. So to understand Jesus at all, you have to understand where he comes from. Just like if I met you and I wanted a significant relationship with you, I would want to know your family and your story and like what mattered to you.
Right.
It's going to be the same for trying to get to know Jesus.
Right.
Right. So I think that's really helpful. I think another good reason to do this is that according to the Christian scriptures, we, Jesus followers, are adopted into the Hebrew people in specific ways. Okay? Well, that means that their family album is now our family album.
Yes.
Right? My daughter is adopted. And one of the things we've really tried to do is to emphasize that our family, mom, dad, whatever, our grandparents, all of those, are also hers, that she belongs to them.
Yeah.
And that she also has family that extends through her birth mom and through her birth father and all of those things. And we're kind of all in that position vis-a-vis the Hebrew people.
Right.
And so to say, no, you know what? Jesus somehow is just this unique little thing that God went poof and then walked him around and then said, okay, now time to die. Poof. You miss the whole point of Jesus and the fact that his flinging, from our perspective, flinging open the doors, it was doors into something that already existed.
Yeah.
Not doors into this nothing, right? This is not Twilight Zone stuff, right? So I think it's really important to get to know the Hebrew scriptures, honestly, from a more Jewish point of view, if you want to understand Jesus.
Exactly.
Right.
You
can't just read Jesus back into everything, because that's not what Jesus was doing.
Right.
Right. So those are a couple of reasons I think it's important. Do you have any particulars? I have one more that I'm going to drop on you, but I want to hear from you.
Well, I think what you said about, those were Jesus' scriptures. They were also the scriptures of the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the teachers of the law, the ones that kept getting pissed off at Jesus. And it's because he was reading those and interpreting them in ways that made them uncomfortable.
Oh, that's a great thought. Okay, go ahead.
And in addition to that, the early Christians were Jews. Or if they weren't Jews, they had been adopted in.
Right.
They were adopted in Gentiles. So the beginning of the Christian faith was the Hebrew faith. Those were their scriptures.
Right.
Tacked onto that, stories about Jesus, things that Jesus had said and taught that were being passed down until the Bible was codified.
Right.
Jesus was reading the scriptures, the same Old Testament that we can read.
Right.
And interpreting them in ways that we now understand as his words.
Right.
And his teachings.
Right.
So Jesus' words and teachings are, by extension, the teachings of the Old Testament.
Right.
Because those were the same things he was studying and then sharing.
That's right.
Right, even as a kid in the temple.
That's right.
So yes, if we want to know more about Jesus and the God of Jesus, being familiar with the scriptures that Jesus knew and taught, and actually was kind of raked over the coals for the way that he taught them.
Right.
But the way that he taught them gets us some insight into who Jesus was and how he was reading the scriptures, how he was interpreting the scriptures, and how that was lived out in his teaching, but also in his life.
Okay, I suddenly flashed on Albert Einstein.
Oh, yeah?
Like, if you think about Einstein as being, kind of a change in the way we think about physics, the way we think about math, and we think about all those things. If you just came to Einstein and learned the theory of relativity and learned all those other things, but had no idea about Newtonian math or Newtonian physics and other kinds of math, you'd have nothing for it to attach to.
Right.
Right? But if you know something about the God Jesus knew, not the God we know through Jesus, but the God Jesus knew, and those scriptures and the stuff he had been brought up with, then you've got something to kind of take his words and go, and his way of living and go, oh, this actually comes naturally out of this other thing. This is not This is not this sudden drop of, an alien onto our planet, right? I love that.
Right.
That's a great
and
point.
it goes back to what we were talking about, progressive Christianity, reading the Bible contextually. Well,
Yes.
this gives us context for Jesus.
Yes.
Jesus' life, Jesus' teachings, Jesus' words.
Yes.
The way Jesus did things. This gives us some context for that because those were his scriptures.
Yes. Yeah. For me, what I'm coming to understand, and this would not have been what I would say 10 years ago, what I'm coming to understand is that if we are people of the book, so if we are Jewish or Christian/Jesus followers, or if we are Muslim, if we are people of the book, we are a people of story.
It's true.
And as much as sometimes people want to hang everything on the Ten Commandments, there's a reason that the Ten Commandments are not the only thing in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And instead we hear people's relationships with each other, with God, with how to live in the world. We see them screw up. We see them succeed. We see them do things that we might not like now.
Yeah.
But all of those things tell us the story of who we are as human beings in a particular way. I mean, there are other good stories. I'm not diminishing other stories. But understanding that our stories are so important because they frame how we exist in the world. And so the same way that Jesus's stories framed and informed who he was in the world, when we go back and understand his stories and his people's stories and understand them as now our stories.
Yeah.
They're our stories. I'm as much a descendant of Abraham as I am of, I don't know, whoever my ancient ancestor was on my father's side. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Whatever the thing is. Mm-hmm. But the same, because I believe adoption is real.
Yes.
And stories are not rules. Stories are a way at getting at truth through the telling of experience and context and all of that.
Yeah.
So if I tell you the story of my life, first of all, it will have a very clear lens because it'll be my story of my life. Mm-hmm. But it also shapes how I see myself, how you see me, all of those things. And it's the same way if we really understand that, this bookshelf of 66 at least books is a whole bunch of stories about people who are now our people.
Right.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta get in touch with the Hebrew Scriptures, which I would think also would help one get in touch with, if you read them as best you can through Jesus's lens, which would be a Jewish lens of some sort. If you can try and do that, it helps us feel as though we are connected to people beyond our own little group.
That's right.
And that's always helpful.
That's awesome. Listeners, we love hearing from you. CocktailTheology.com is where we are. What are your thoughts on the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament? Do you read them? Have you been taught them? What was the lens through which you were taught the Hebrew Scriptures? We would love to hear from you. Questions, ideas for episodes, ideas for cocktails, bring them to us at CocktailTheology.com.
Bye.
Funny how the view can change, how life just seems to rearrange itself, no matter what it was. I don't know how it goes, but look, moving on feels pretty good. Moving on feels pretty good.
If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a like and hit subscribe wherever you're listening right now. We welcome your comments, questions, and ideas for conversations and for cocktails. Please get in touch with us at our website, CocktailTheology.com. Cocktail Theology is a production of SFS. Our theme song is Moving On Feels Pretty Good, recorded by yours truly, Benton Stokes. You can find my music wherever you stream your favorite artists. Join us next Thursday for another new episode.